Mental health professionals of Reddit, what is the saddest case of wow this person really fucked up because of how they were treated during their childhood you have ever come across? One of my first cases, when I first started in the mental health field, and I'll never forget, I was providing therapy to a young girl who was pooping on herself after holding it in for as long as she could. Mom originally thought it was some kind of anxiety or fear of the toilet, but after a couple more sessions I found out that the girl was being sexually abused by her stepfather, and pooping felt like penetration to her, so in order to avoid that sensation she would hold it in as long as possible. It was heartbreaking to find that out, and a hell of an introduction to the field. I worked in corrections, and on Sundays there would be coffee with breakfast. One of my female inmates always vomited, and basically it turned out that as a teen her dad would rape her then buy her coffee to make himself feel less guilty about it. The sight or smell of coffee made her projectile vomit even a decade later. I had a client from a court program who said her dad used to inject her with drugs, and as a little kid used to pimp her out to his friends. This was all while she was single digits in age. She spent her life using varying substances and prostituting herself. So now that she's trying to get clean, she struggled even more with managing the emotions of her trauma. I worked as a counselor in that program for a year and heard many similar stories, but this one sticks out the most because of how hard it seemed like she was trying to turn things around. I worked at a psychiatric hospital for guys who had successfully argued not guilty for reasons of insanity pleas. One guy had murdered his neighbor after they had some kind of normal neighborly dispute. He told me, in detail, how he grew up on a farm and his dad would kill one of his dogs in front of him every time he acted out as a child. An individual whose mother threw acid on her, scars all over her body from it, and that was only the tip of the abuse iceberg this client had to deal with. I once had a patient that offered herself to be raped by her stepfather so he would not instead rape her little sister while her mother was passed out drunk in the sofa. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget this. I work with people with developmental disabilities. One dude was literally chained to a bed and sold as a sex slave as a child. He is totally mild-mannered, sweet, and chill, but if he feels nervous or threatened he hulks out. His group home had a vending machine in the basement, so the staff took him down there to get him a special snack that they didn't have in the kitchen. Being in the poorly lit basement sent him into PTSD hell, and he knocked that thing right over. Another time he was sitting on his bed, and staff was trying to put his shirt on him. The staff sort of hoisted himself up by putting his foot on the guy's bed, making himself loom over the client. Staff got his rib broken with a kick. Everyone's learned to be more cognizant of possible triggers, but you always have to be wary of setting off an episode. No one blames him though, and he is always so apologetic afterward, almost heartbreakingly so. So many parents seem to think their divorce doesn't affect their kids. Can't go into specifics, but one kid ended up with conversion disorder because their parents' divorce was so horrendous. Parents, don't drag your kids into your mess. Keep it civil. Don't let kids witness the nasty, drawn out stuff. They are not pawns in your chess battle with your ex. They are your children, and you will give them lifelong issues if you treat them as points to be won. Psychiatrist here. First year, just graduated medical school. Saw a case on the inpatient adolescent unit of a 14-year-old boy with suspected DMDD, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. He was admitted after blowing out of his most recent foster placement. In a fit of rage he broke TVs, tables, walls. He attacked the police officers called to the house, biting and scratching at them. He sounded like an overall piece of S***T, bratty kid. Come to learn he was born with NAS, neonatal abstinence syndrome, to a mother abusing fourth, and inhaled heroin during all 3 trimesters. He was born in acute opiate withdrawal requiring methadone replacement therapy for the first year of infancy. Fast forward 14 years with that baseline level of neurologic functioning, and you get a kid who seemingly explodes for no reason, when in reality his prefrontal cortex is years behind, causing his impulsivity to be almost unrestrained. Sad case. Cool kid though. He kicked my ass in Smash 4 Wii most days. I've been working at a mental health facility for about 30 years now, and I once was counseling a man who was held down and tickled for minutes upon minutes. The man now has a paranoia of tank tops and shorts because he believes it leaves him vulnerable. I had a patient whose mom pulled her out of school due to anxiety and bullying, and then just didn't seek help. She kept her at home not talking to anyone for 4 years. Now she is an adult and incapable of looking anyone in the eye. I'm a trained counselor and worked in a place for youth who sexually harm others. Most of these young people have experienced sexual abuse themselves at a very young age, ranging from severe neglect, crying as a baby for hours, and not being changed, to seeing a father figure forcing lewd acts on the mother to incest. It was difficult hearing about their history. One particular case stands out. He was still a kid when he got sexually abused by an older man. The man stayed in the house with his family because he was a family friend. The boy was often in his room and even sleeping overnight. The parents didn't say anything while the abuse continued. He was wrongfully taught abuse equals love. So when he started liking other kids, he did what he knew from his own sad experiences. I don't know the rest of the details, but there's a guy that was taken from his parents. One of the reasons cited was witnessed his parents ritually sacrifice a dog. He deserves all the disability checks that he gets. No child should see that ***T. I was punched in the face by a man who was beaten as a child. His dad would make him and his mom crawl on all fours in the backyard like dogs and beat them. His dad would force him to watch his dad perform sexual acts on his mother. He and his mom would have to put their head in between their legs on car rides into town because his father didn't want to be seen with them. He was constantly trying to escape the group home he lived in because the trauma would replay in his head. I've never felt so much love toward someone who is abusive, but he really had a heart of gold when he wasn't in PTSD mode. When he punched me in the face, it was like he was seeing a different face on me. He did it then just stared at me as if he didn't know what he had just done. I'm a licensed social worker and I work at a psych hospital. The saddest stories are the kids who have had a suicide attempt at such young ages. As others who work in this field have mentioned, it's typically some sort of trauma and lack of supports in place. Several health organizations did a research study on adverse childhood events and how it affected the health of an individual long term. The study was interesting because it showed that childhood trauma can directly correlate to earlier death in individuals. You can find the questions online with the power of Google for anyone who is interested. Worked in med-surg, but had a guy in his 20s who had a lot of mental health problems and physical problems. He was a paraplegic with large open bed sores on his bottom, with schizophrenia and bipolar. He threw trays at us, once ripped the call light out of the wall and hit another nurse with it. He would freak out and try to climb out of bed if we shut the door. Finally got the backstory. His mom and older sister kept him locked in a closet and only took him out to molest him. So he lived in a closet for half his life until finally CPS was notified. He was in custody of the state and his bed sore started bleeding heavily. Doctors would not order blood transfusions. He died in the hospital crying, holding my coworker's hand, asking if he was going to heaven. Such bad circumstances. Prenatal exposure to alcohol and or drugs. Born premature head injury as a baby due to parental neglect. This person was not even 6 months old and the future was so grim. Clinical psychologist here. It would indeed be unethical to describe details here. However, what gets me the most sad are the tales of childhood sexual abuse. As adults, these souls are still wrestling with a myriad of self-esteem related traumas. Child abuse crosses an ocean of time to steal the joy from even the simplest of daily life moments and activities. If anyone out there reads this, please reach out and get some help. With quality therapy you can reclaim your personal power and begin to thrive. I know this will be buried, but thank you to mental health professionals, you saved my life. Had to spend the longest week of my life in a suicide-proof cell. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced, but that was because of the self-reflection. You are saints, and you deserve far more recognition for the work you do. I'm sorry to the police, EMTs, and nurses that had to deal with me, and yet you helped me get to where I can at least just be. Thank you. More than once I have met someone who was sold by a parent for drugs. You can genuinely feel your heart break when you hear that out loud. A guy who was born with a smaller penis. Doctors decided to remove the testicles and have him raised as a girl. It wasn't a hermaphrodite case. They just decided without running any tests or anything. Latin America 40 years ago. His name was changed to a female name. He was raised as a girl and forced to pee sitting down and punished whenever he peed standing up. At 10 he was taken to an endocrinologist who didn't run any tests, just began female hormones treatment. In his adolescence he went through sex change surgeries. They made a vagina and inserted stuff to open up the space, always in front of medicine students. He had 3 marriages with men and all were horrible. He wanted to kill himself, so a friend of his took him to see the pastor of her church. The pastor spoke to him and told him God tells her the problem is that he is a man. He thought she was crazy and left, but the idea lingered. So he, still as a she, went to look for his original birth certificate in his country and found that he had been inscribed as a male with a male name and all, but 15 days later his name had been changed to a female name and all. He had grown up thinking he was a woman who needed all these treatments. So he got genetic testing and found out he is a male. No female organs whatsoever. So at 40 he decided to change back. Needed surgery to undo all that had been done. He had a lot of trouble dealing with his degrees and documents because everything was under his female identity. He became a pastor himself and married a woman. I didn't treat him. It was a forensic psychology evaluation. Make sure to like and subscribe for more daily content. Thanks for watching.